It began as something small, something so ordinary that no one paid attention at first. Over the course of 10 years, dozens of young men started to disappear across different cities in the United States. They were all the same kind of people, healthy, athletic, college students full of life and promise. Their families described them as cheerful and responsible. They were the kind of people who had their whole future ahead of them. Most of them vanished after a night out, leaving a party, walking home from a bar, or just meeting friends. And then they were gone. Days or weeks later, their bodies would be discovered, floating in rivers, canals, or lakes. And every single time, the police would say the same thing: accidental drowning, end of story. But not everyone was convinced. Near many of these bodies, on bridges or old brick walls, someone had spray-painted a strange, simple symbol, a smiling face. A yellow circle, 2 dots for eyes, and an unsettling curved smile. A mark so ordinary, yet so out of place beside death. At first, nobody paid much attention. A smiley face was too common, too meaningless. Surely it was coincidence. But then, 2 former detectives, Kevin Gannon and Anthony Duarte, began to see what no one else could. Both men had worked countless homicide cases before, but something about these deaths didn't sit right with them. The patterns were too consistent, the circumstances too similar, and the evidence too perfectly convenient. When they began to collect files and connect the dots, they uncovered something that made their blood run cold. These weren't isolated drownings. This was a pattern that stretched across states, rivers, and years. And behind it, they suspected, was a terrifying truth. Someone, or several someones, was hunting young men and leaving behind a smiling face as their signature. They began to call it the Smiley Face Killer's theory. Gannon and Duarte examined more than 50 cases. They noticed that most victims were male college students, usually last seen leaving a bar late at night, often alone, slightly drunk, easy targets. Toxicology reports revealed traces of GHB, the date rape drug, and other sedatives in many of the victims. This suggested they were drugged, kidnapped, and killed, and only later placed in water to make their deaths look like drownings. In several cases, their bodies showed signs that didn't match a normal drowning. Their arms had bruises from being restrained. Some had ligature marks on their necks or wrists. A few were even missing shoes or personal belongings, which mysteriously reappeared days later. One of the most disturbing cases was that of Chris Jenkins, a student in Minnesota. He vanished one Halloween night after leaving a bar. 4 months later, his body was found frozen in the Mississippi River. The police called it an accident, another drunk college student who fell into the water. But when Kevin Gannon reviewed the case, he found chilling details the police had ignored. Chris's arms were raised above his head, bound tightly. His clothes were reversed, as if someone had dressed him after death. It looked like someone had staged the scene to mimic a drowning. Another haunting case was that of Dakota James, a 23-year-old student from Pittsburgh. He disappeared after a night out with friends. 40 days later, his body was found in a river. His skin showed no wounds, but faint marks around his neck suggested strangulation. Still, the police repeated the same conclusion: accidental drowning. As Gannon and Duarte mapped every case on a national map, a disturbing pattern emerged. Each body was found near a body of water, and in almost every case within a short distance, a smiley face graffiti appeared. Sometimes it was faded, sometimes fresh, but always watching, as if mocking those trying to find the truth. The detectives began to believe this was the work of a group, not one person. A network of killers operating in different cities, communicating through the dark web, sharing targets, planning abductions, and executing murders that would appear as tragic accidents. They theorized that this group targeted young, fit, intelligent men, perhaps out of jealousy, hatred, or for some ritualistic purpose. To them, these murders were art, and the smiley face was their twisted signature. In 2008, their theory exploded into the mainstream. Major networks like NBC, CNN, and Fox News ran special reports and documentaries. People across the country began to ask, how can so many similar deaths be dismissed as accidents? But the FBI publicly rejected the theory. They claimed there was no concrete evidence to link the cases, and insisted that all the deaths were coincidental. Despite that, the victims' families refused to stay silent. Mothers and fathers who had lost their sons began to form online communities, sharing photos, timelines, and evidence that pointed toward something far more sinister. Some independent researchers even proposed that the Smiley Face Killers could be part of an underground cult, a group performing water rituals as a form of sacrifice. They believed that drowning the victims symbolized purification, a dark offering to something beyond human understanding. Others believed it was a group of thrill seekers, people who killed for the adrenaline rush, who hunted young men just for the pleasure of watching the world call it an accident. But nobody could prove anything. No arrests, no witnesses, no footage, only patterns and fear. And even now, strange stories continue to surface. In different states, years apart, the same thing happens again and again. A young man goes missing after a night out. A few days later, his body is found in water, and nearby, faded and almost forgotten, a smiley face stares from a bridge or a wall, like a silent taunt. For investigators, it has become one of America's most haunting mysteries. A story that refuses to die. 2 decades later, the killers, and if they exist, may still be out there. Maybe they're watching the headlines. Maybe they're reading the stories online. Or maybe they're already choosing their next victim. Some say the smiley faces are nothing more than coincidence. Others believe they're a message, a symbol left by those who enjoy the fear they create. But one thing is certain. Every time another young man vanishes, and another body is pulled from a river, the world remembers the same chilling question. What if the smiley face killers are real?